everyone, it's Katie. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Before we get started, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, as well as subscribe down here if you'd like to, and also make sure that you ring the bell so you know when I go live. Okay, so the last few days I have been in this sort of Duggar rabbit hole, and I know. A lot of you who have been following the channel are like, Katie, enough already. Why so much about the Duggars? Well, it's hard to pass a story up when you have people from a show providing you information and asking you to share it. So when I did an interview with Derek Dillard, he brought up content related to contracts on Counting On and issues that he and Jill had run up against while they were married very early on in their marriage, as it related to not being able to talk about certain aspects of their lives without going through the proper channels, through the production and through their families, finding out how contracts that Jim Bob Duggar had prevented Derek and Jill from doing and taking jobs outside of the state, preventing them from doing things outside of the show, which also sort of has brought up this rabbit hole of why don't the older Duggars work, what's going on with this. Well, I'm not going to talk about the Duggars today, but I want to talk about something that can probably provide us a little bit of insight about what we're seeing with this related to the Duggars. And first and foremost, I'd say the biggest show that was ever on TLC related to kids, when we think of it, is John and Kate. John and Kate Plus 8 followed a family of John and Kate Gosselin and their 8 children, Maddie and Kara, and the sextuplets. Kate and John started from a very early time deciding that they were going to put their kids out to the public as consumption and entertainment. Kate lobbied for a show. She was constantly asking for freebies. She was using her growing up in the evangelical world and the daughter of a pastor as sort of this way to speak to an audience of Christians. And for a lot of people watching the show, they felt like they were watching a wholesome family show about Christians with, great family values. And, you see this sort of trend on TLC. Now, TLC used to be called the Learning Channel, where we would actually learn about topics. We would learn about different things about the world. They used to have documentaries on there. And it somehow over time evolved into this sort of sideshow where we as a public are consuming shows about families that are sort of on the outliers. But a common theme on this channel is that many of the shows that you're watching are of families who are deep faith. Now, I have a contact who I've been working with for a few months now who used to blog about John and Kate way back in the day and had relationships with a lot of the people and all of the moving parts that were part of this show. We know that Robert Hoffman was a person that worked for Us Weekly and was supposed to sort of follow them. He released a book which sort of outlined a lot of the things about Kate that were hidden about Kate from the public, and things about the family that other people didn't want to see. It was not very favorable to Kate, and conversely, things about John were sort of like it wasn't as kind to John either, but they were a lot nicer to John, let's just say, in that book. One person that spoke out a lot about Kate and John in the very early days, after maybe a couple seasons, was Kate's brother, Kevin, and his wife, Jody. Now, Aunt Jody and Uncle Kevin were on the show a lot, and then suddenly they weren't. Well, what happened was John and Kate, as the demands of filming became more and more, the kids were working a lot. In fact, in an interview this year, John told Dr. Oz that there was a month back in the heyday where they had taken only 2 days off of February. In that entire year, they were filming constantly. They had cameras hooked up in the rooms of the children, cameras hooked up in their living rooms. Every single room was outfitted, so nothing was missed, everything was caught, meaning the kids were basically working all the time. At the time, Jody and Kevin were really worried about and concerned for the well-being of their kids, their nieces and nephews. They said that the kids were developing personality disorders, that they were having behaviors, they were having psychological issues, that there was discipline happening here that wasn't okay. And as they blew the whistle, Kate and John pushed them away, and Kate over time basically isolated everyone that told her not to do what she was doing and to actually think about her kids. Now, all these years later, John has come out and he's sort of come out as the hero. But let's be honest, John might have at the time decided that he wanted to stop filming, but it hasn't stopped John from trying to capitalize on all of this. In fact, when he started speaking in this past fall, this wasn't all because John was being, let's just say, charitable. He was getting exclusives. He had exclusives with Daily Mail. He had an exclusive with Dr. Oz. He was getting paid for all of the information that was provided about Kate. Great. Some people will say, well, of course, he should make some money. Sure. But if he was really being altruistic, it would never have been about getting paid to release the information. Even I tried to speak to John and ask very basic questions about what was going on because I'm an advocate and I try to speak to the issues about children on reality television. And he wouldn't tell me anything because he said, I'm under exclusive. And then after I posted a critical video about John, suggesting that maybe he could have done more during that time, even though he was up against a machine with TLC, there had to have been more he could have done. I was blocked by him on Instagram. It's weird. I'm of the belief that no story should have a bias, that you should never just go to a source and suggest that you're going to be on their side. I am a truth seeker. And so when he blocked me, I was like, that's weird. He's getting paid by all of these other outlets because he has these exclusives, meaning they're paying for his content, which, hey, if you have the opportunity to get paid for your story, that's fine. But at least you should be disclosing that, right? Anyways, I digress. John and Kate were the very first sort of guinea pigs in this world of reality television. And they were the first to sort of show us what's wrong in the reality TV show world as it relates to the kids on these shows. Kate, for instance, wouldn't have paid her kids a dime had new laws not been legislated in the state of Pennsylvania, which were brought to them by who? Her brother and her sister-in-law, Kevin and Jody. So my contact, who used to run a blog about Kate and John Plus 8 back in the day, this group of bloggers, along with Jody and Kevin, were the only ones that were really concerned about the well-being of these kids. John and Kate were making millions of dollars, and it was the people on the outside that were concerned about the sextuplets and the twins. Now, John, for his part, has done his best now to get the kids off the air and has been fighting to get them off the air for a very long time. But in the heyday, he wasn't doing a whole lot. So what actually happened? So what I did was this blogger friend who doesn't ever want me to out them, but you know who you are, and thank you so much for all of this valuable information, provided me some insight about things that were done on behind the scenes. And what happened was Jody and Kevin actually were speaking out with multiple outlets concerned about the welfare of the kids. And what they ended up doing is they met up with a person they met with a senator and in the state. And what they did was they drafted legislation that would actually protect children, basically enacting different stipulations, because at the time in Pennsylvania, reality television was not covered under the law. And currently in multiple states, it's still not covered under the law. And still to this day, networks like TLC are bypassing child labor laws by not having contracts with kids, but rather having contracts with the parents. So therefore the parents don't have to have work permits for their kids because the kids aren't working. Mom and dad are working. The kids are just there hanging out, except they are working, except the kids are on camera, except the kids are in videos. The kids are being interviewed. Now, once Counting On came on, the younger kids weren't seen as much, but this past season, we saw the younger kids on TLC for Counting On. And to this day, the state of Arkansas says there's never been a single work permit applied for those children in the state of Arkansas by Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar. So what happened in Pennsylvania? Well, back in the day when they were trying to get this done, basically what the senator did was they started looking at everything within this industry. So Senator Murt, they took a look at things and they said, this is what he said in a statement to the press. Pennsylvania is becoming home to a growing number of television and film productions. As more productions come to the Commonwealth, we have responsibility to examine our laws to ensure that they are sufficient to enable these productions to occur safely and that the interests of all involved are protected. He noted that in 2002 through 2008, 922 productions took place, all in Pennsylvania. In 2002, 31 films were released. By 2008, that had increased to 175, and that was an increased rate of 33%. So he said, with the growing industry in the Commonwealth, the current law is not adequate to address the particular issues that come to place. And then they said, based on testimony and hearings we've heard, they developed a bill, House Bill 2515. Representative Murt said this bill is aimed at addressing several holes in the current law and were identified at the hearing. And so this is what the bill actually was looking to sort of close up. It required all minors to have a work permit issued by the State Department of Labor and Industry to ensure all adequate provisions have been made for the minors' education, instruction, supervision, and health and welfare. Restrict minors to work between the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and set guidelines for the amount of hours of work, recreation, schoolwork, and activities per day. Require the presence of a set teacher on the set of any production. This person will serve as an advocate for the minor to ensure the minor's health, education, moral safety on the set. In addition, the person will monitor the working conditions and the health, mental health, and the demands placed on the child. And it requires that 15% of their gross earnings be set aside by the employer in a trust for the minor. At least one parent or legal guardian shall be trustee of those funds unless otherwise determined by the court. So that bill actually became a law. But it was until this bill actually passed that Kate and John never put one dime of the money that they made of the show towards their children. They now have nice trust funds, all of them. They have not a lot of money set aside, but it's only by the work of people like her sister-in-law Jody and her brother Kevin that worked with legislatures to enact and ensure the safety of their children. It was these same laws that actually worked in John's benefit last year when he petitioned the court and said, TLC filmed my kids and they never had work permits and you never provided work permits, you denied them. And they provided evidence to the court showing that the state of Pennsylvania had denied the work permits due to the mental health and the issues caused to both Colin and Hannah from filming. So legislation that his former brother and sister-in-law got in place for his kids actually helped him years later when he actually wanted to do something to keep his kids off the air. Isn't that sort of funny if you think about it? It's almost like, I don't even know. It's interesting, let's just say. But the thing about it is that the state of Pennsylvania was not doing anything before then. And some of the things that are problematic with reality television, if there isn't specific laws in place, this is what they did, a study, and they looked at people on these productions, and it said this is what Murt found in his staff when they consulted Kevin and Jody Kreider, who are Kate's brother and sister-in-law. They consulted representatives from the entertainment industry, including TLC, the Motion Picture Association, national child labor experts. They spoke to child actors, Paul Peterson of California. They said at the time, no background checks are required for any of the show's technicians or videographers who sometimes work solo with filming of the children. That's what Peterson told them. So he said that he was on the Mickey Mouse Club and the Donna Reed Show. And so he said that minors 7 to 17 working on TV, movie productions, or other will be required to have a work permit issued, but they'd also have to have anyone that's with these kids, they don't have checks on them to ensure that the people that have them have nothing in their background. As a parent, you and I would never send our kids to a camp if we knew that people that were there hadn't had a background check. It's why in schools, when you volunteer, the public school makes you go and pass a background check. It's to protect kids so that they know what adults are in that child's life. But on these shows, they didn't have anything like that in place. And this was in Pennsylvania. It's not known what's going on in Arkansas. So when we think about this in this context, it's not hard to see that unless somebody is told to do something, that a parent actually won't protect their child. Because what happens is the parents and their narcissistic belief and need for attention, money, and fame outweighs and becomes more important than the safety and well-being of their children. And this is what neighbors actually saw of John and Kate plus 8. So a former neighbor who lived in the same development as John and Kate when the show was filming, he said that they had so many issues with the family when they lived in this area. So they talked, the writer on a former blog talked directly about the issues associated with this family. What they said was kind of shocking because it talked a lot about, I'll tell you who actually wrote it. It comes directly from a former neighbor. And it comes on the blog is cpyu.org. And so he talked about it, and he said that it's not that the Goslings, this was something critical he said about it. He said, it's not that the Goslings are high-profile Christians who are going through the everyday struggles with sin. Rather, they've chosen to live a high-profile life that is increasingly but eagerly embracing another way. Without a doubt, the kids are cute. Without a doubt, raising 8 young kids has to be difficult, but it is that reason enough to overlook and even justify the horrible things that are being done and happening, and embrace a family that is obviously self-destructing before the world because of their habits and choices. I could say that this is the same thing that we're seeing on the Duggars. TLC has this way of choosing Christian families because they are owned by someone who apparently, according to my blogger connection, is a fundamentalist or is very, deep in the Christian world. And so they really like to highlight these Christian reality shows regardless of the fact and of the problems that are in these families. Neighbors overwhelmingly saw issues with this family, and this was the second thing that the neighbor wrote. He said, "We have to wonder why the train was allowed to continue to wreck even though it was heading off the tracks for a long, long time. I think one or both of the two things happened. On the one hand, the people closest to John and Kate, who could have been advising them wisely, may have become so starstruck and enamored themselves that they did not want to compromise their ability to rub elbows on a regular basis with celebrity. They didn't want to tell their emperor that he or she is not wearing clothes. They didn't say anything. On the other hand, the stars themselves are so self-absorbed that they don't want to listen to anyone who might offer them good counsel and, yes, even biblical advice. My guess is that it's a combination of both. Those who have known to have spoken up have been systematically removed by the powers that be from the system. The result is that the emperor can remain naked without anyone watching. Sadly, we're now at a point that's becoming embarrassed by the emperor's ignorance." So here's the thing. Kate and John pushed out anyone that told them that what they were doing was wrong, that there could have been negative influences to the kids, and it didn't matter to them because they were making millions and the children turned into commodities. And that's actually what John has said now. He has said everything about the show was about commercials, what they had to wear, what they had to use for diapers, what they had to use for wipes. It was all scripted. Same thing can probably be said for the Duggars. This is a show that claims to be about Christianity, but what it's turned into the Jim Bob Duggar show. We were promised by TLC that in 2015, when everything came out with Josh, that they were not going to have Josh on the show and Jim and Michelle would not be on, that it would only focus on Jill and Jessa. But guess what? Jim and Michelle are back. So are their kids. So how is the show called Counting On anymore? And why are we allowing Jim and Michelle back, given their history of covering things up with their kids? And TLC, why would they not offer the same contract to Jill and Jessa and make sure that Jill and Jessa were paid rather than keeping the same contract with Jim Bob? Well, it's easy. In the state of Arkansas, if a child has a contract and is employed, they have to get a work permit. How do you get around that? You don't have a contract or a work agreement with a child and instead have the work agreement with their parents. That's right. Jim Bob is the sole owner of the show, therefore all money goes through him and he doesn't have to get work permits. In fact, the state of Arkansas has repeatedly said that never have the Duggars ever one time applied for a permit, nor has TLC or any employer reported them for not having a work permit because, according to Derek, along with all these Amy Duggar and all these other people that are not speaking up because they're too afraid, they weren't technically employed. And it's a way for them to get around having a work permit. Because Arkansas doesn't have laws like this. They don't have anything forcing the kids to have a trust fund. There's nothing enacted that says that he has to have work permits if they're not employed. They have very loose regulations. They do have regulations that if you're in the entertainment industry and you're working, you're not supposed to, you have to have a work permit. But Jim Bob, he just says that the kids aren't working, they're volunteering. So therefore, he doesn't have to get a work permit. People have been screaming about this online for years. They have been demanding the state of Arkansas do something, and they've been demanding that people be exposed to the fact that these kids are working and they don't have work permits. In fact, when I was on Facebook, I found out and looked into an old post of people that was posted on 2016 by a woman who was demanding that TLC do something about it. They posted links to the labor laws. In fact, they even provided links to all of the people at the state that you could report to tell them, make sure these kids are paid. People knew back in 2016 that the kids were not being paid. So we shouldn't be surprised today when Derek says, I wasn't paid, Jill wasn't paid, we weren't paid. When he says Amy wasn't paid, because the general public that knew about them knew that the kids weren't getting paid. According to this, they said, this is what they wrote. They said, the Duggar family is filming once again with the new show Counting On, and this is on the TLC's on their Facebook page, despite what happened with Josh, right? I put this information together with those working on this issue. Pressure must be put on the Arkansas Department of Labor, informing them of their continued filming of the children and asking if work permits are in place and the laws are enforced. They have turned their heads to the stuff that's going on with the child labor and stuff with Josh. They do not have to enforce the law if TLC does not contact them. They are not obligated to contact potential employers on their own. Per the DOL and the Attorney General, through open public records, any publication per letters directly there are no records found within the Arkansas's DOL regarding 19 kids and counting going back to the beginning of filming. A Google search, 19 kids and counting work permits, will provide this information, and it's documented. So you can do that, and when you don't go back and see, you can see that people have been shouting to the rooftops about this for years. So we shouldn't be surprised by what Derek is saying. What's going to have to happen for Derek and for those kids is somebody like Aunt Jody and Uncle Kevin are going to have to stand up to Arkansas and say, you need to protect these kids. They need to be paid. Think of all the years that Jill was on TV, all of those years, doing all of those things, never once being paid because TLC never had a contract with her, wasn't paying her. She was never considered an employee, which again is why they're able to get around all of these things with payment, because Jim Bob says, you're a volunteer. And that's why he calls them volunteers, because then he doesn't have to get the work permit. It's unconscionable if you actually think about it. The person went on to share information about the state attorney general, phone numbers for different colleagues, and then they outlined different facts about the actual labor laws. And it says phone calls and emails to the Arkansas Department of Labor, TLC is filming again. The newborns are being filmed, which, by the way, it's illegal in the state of Arkansas for a newborn to be filmed that's under 15 days. It's illegal. So it says there are no records, zero pertaining to 19 kids and counting from day one. We have to have this addressed. There is a child labor law in Arkansas for minors and entertainment. Per this, it's applied to reality. It has been applied to reality TV. Kids that are under 15 days old cannot be on TV, period. But newborns, we know, are on the show all the time. I will be linking a lot, but here's the thing. According to the Arkansas's own labor laws, they have to have a work permit. They cannot work more than 6 days a week. They cannot work more than 8 hours a day or 48 hours a week for children who are 14 and 15 years old. 15 children under 14 can't be employed. They can't work before 6 a.m. or after 7 p.m. They can't, there's just so many different laws here that are supposed to protect children that somehow they're bypassing and getting around. Now it's been because the kids barely are on the show, but they never renewed contracts or actually had employment agreements with the kids, the older kids, so nobody's getting paid but Jim Bob. If that's not narcissism and greed, I don't know what else is. And so they try to tell you it's about faith, it's about Christianity, but it's not. Because the average Christian person would not go on TV and exploit their children for fame, for attention, and for money, and then not pay their children and put their own self-interests for fame, power, and greed in front of the well-being and health of their children. Kate Gosselin was a perfect person to show and show us perfectly about what happens to children that are on reality television. Now, Derek Dillard is screaming to the rooftops that this is happening in his own family, and yet still nothing is being done, and people are still questioning his motives and why he's doing what he's doing. I'm not. I see it, and I saw it from the beginning. And I suggest that if you are interested, you consider checking out, and I'll put a link down here for that old blog that I've been talking about from Kate Gosselin. And I will also suggest, I'll provide some links for the actual Department of Labor in Arkansas so you can see. This could be the reason why we are not seeing or haven't seen any child labor issues in Arkansas, because one, they don't have any. Two, Jim Bob might be skirting the issue by not having them as employees. Either way, it doesn't matter. The kids are still working. The show is generating money, and by TLC not doing the due diligence and having the kids work in a setting where they're actually employees, they are also breaking the law, in my opinion. All right, you guys, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Do you think that if they don't do something in each state, should there be a federal law that protects these children, or do we need state by state guidelines? And because some states are harder to film in than others, some people and production companies will bypass those states. Like New York and California are notoriously difficult to film in, so they go and seek out states that have looser laws. Arkansas has looser laws. Given all of that, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about the kids not being paid and about the contracts being done through the parents rather than the children, so that the children aren't considered employees? Does that smell like fraud to you? Let me know in the comments below. Bye, guys.